You know that feeling when you argue with a friend about a memory? You're both absolutely 100% convinced you're right, only to find out you were totally wrong? We all trust our memories, right? We think of them as these perfect little recordings of the past. But what if I told you your own mind might be playing tricks on you? And not just you, but millions of other people, all at the same time. All right, let's just dive right in with a little test. How do you spell the last name of this famous family of bears from those kids' books? Come on, picture the cover. Say the name out loud. You got it? Okay. So if you remembered it with an E, Bernstein, well, you're definitely not alone. In fact, millions of people remember that exact same spelling. Here's the catch. It's always been Berenstain with an A. Now, if you're feeling a little weirded out right now, don't worry. You've just stumbled into a massive shared false memory. This really fascinating and honestly kind of spooky phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the Mandela effect. And it's not just about some cartoon bears. It's this huge glitch in our collective memory that messes with everything from iconic movie quotes to brand names we grew up with. So what is it exactly? Well, the whole term got started because tons of people suddenly realized they shared a very specific, very wrong memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison back in the 1980s. But of course, he was released and became president. The phenomenon was named after him, and it's basically anytime a huge group of people all misremember the exact same thing. And what's so wild is just how right these wrong versions feel. I mean, you can totally picture the Monopoly man with a monocle, can't you? We can all hear Darth Vader's voice saying, "Luke, I am your father." And so many of us would swear on a stack of cookbooks that we ate Jiffy peanut butter as kids. But none of it ever happened. Okay, so this brings us to the big question. How on earth does this happen? I mean, are there parallel universes leaking into ours, like some people think? Or is the answer a little less sci-fi and a lot closer to home, like right inside our own skulls? Let's get into the cognitive glitches that are actually behind all of this. So first things first, we have to get one fundamental thing straight about our own minds. Your memory, it is not a video camera. It's not a hard drive that just perfectly records and plays back everything that happens. It's actually more like a storyteller. Every single time you remember something, your brain is piecing it back together from little fragments of information. It's a creative and, yeah, a very flawed reconstruction. And that brings us to our first key idea, confabulation. It's a fancy-sounding word, but it's really just your brain's automatic process for making sense of things. See, when there's a gap in one of your memories, your brain hates that empty space. So without you even knowing it, it just invents details that seem plausible to create a story that feels complete. Think about it like this. If I asked you what you had for lunch last Tuesday, you probably don't really remember, but your brain might just invent an answer. It'll say, "Oh, probably a sandwich. I usually have a sandwich." It does that because a sandwich is a believable detail that fits the story of your life, so it feels true, even if your brain totally just made it up. Now, this whole process is often guided by our next concept, which is called a schema. A schema is basically a mental shortcut. It's a pre-existing template in your brain for how things are supposed to be. For example, your schema for a library probably includes books and quiet people and shelves. And this explains the Monopoly Man thing perfectly. Our cultural schema, our mental shortcut for a rich, old-timey tycoon, almost always includes a top hat and a monocle. So when we try to remember what the Monopoly Man looks like, our brain pulls up that schema and helpfully adds the monocle that was never actually there to begin with. And finally, there's something called source amnesia. This is what happens when you remember a piece of information perfectly fine, but you have no idea where you learned it. You've got the facts, but the source is just gone. The famous Star Wars quote is the ultimate example of this. The line, "Luke, I am your father," has been repeated and parodied and joked about so many times in pop culture that that version has become the memory we all have. We've forgotten that the source of that specific line was a sitcom or a cartoon, not the actual movie, and it just overwrites the original memory in our heads. So we've got these little glitches happening inside our own individual brains. But how does that turn into a massive global thing? Well, in our world, you just add one incredibly powerful ingredient, the internet. See, the internet creates this incredible reinforcement cycle. It all starts with one person posting online, "Hey, does anyone else remember the Berenstain Bears?" Then tons of others jump in saying, "Me too," and that creates social proof, this powerful feeling that you're not crazy, which makes the false memory feel even more real. Pretty soon, it's getting repeated in articles and videos and memes, solidifying the mistake until it becomes a kind of digital fact. So what that really means is that a simple Google search can now instantly prove to you that your false memory is shared by thousands, maybe millions of people. And that digital validation is so incredibly persuasive, it can make a collective mistake feel way more real than the actual, sometimes hard to find truth. Now, all this is pretty fascinating stuff, but you might be thinking, okay, so what? It's just trivia about cartoons and peanut butter. But it turns out understanding just how fragile our memory is has some very serious, very real-world consequences. I mean, really think about it. If millions of us can be dead wrong about something as simple as a brand name, what does that say about the reliability of an eyewitness in a courtroom, when someone's actual freedom is on the line? Or what does it tell us about how easily misinformation can spread like wildfire online? And let's bring it back to a really personal level. Our memories, they're who we are. They are the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives, our good times, our bad times. They are literally the building blocks of our identity. But this whole phenomenon forces us to ask a really tough question. What if the blueprint is flawed? Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who is one of the top researchers in this field, she put it perfectly. She said memory is more of an imaginative reconstruction of the past than a literal copy of it. We're all basically artists, just painting a picture of our past from a mix of facts, feelings, and, fabrications. Which leaves us with one last kind of unsettling question to think about. If your memory really is just a story that you are constantly retelling yourself, then how much of your own past is actually fiction?